Hello, my friend. Today I bring you another lost legend from the depths of Middle-earth. Close your eyes, feel the magic surround you. Our journey begins. There is a slumber deeper than stone and older than sleep, where flame dreams of crowns and ash remembers gold. The sun did not rise quickly over Erebor in those days. It lingered behind the jagged teeth of the grey mountains, casting long shadows over the desolation like a hand reluctant to wake a nightmare. The wind that once bore the songs of dwarves now carried silence, or something older still, like the breath of a creature dreaming in the deep. It had been years, long and slow and sorrow-heavy, since any dared approach the great gate of the lonely mountain. The stone road that once rang with cartwheels and hammer song now lay choked in broken bone and blackened earth. No grass grew there, nor moss. Even the birds, who suffer no kings, turned their wings when they passed overhead. But the mountain was not dead, not truly. In the heart of the stone, beneath ridges older than kingdoms, slept a fire. Not a forge flame, nor the gentle light of a hearth. This was a hoard fire, the kind that coils around greed, the kind that waits. There, beneath the weight of 100 years of gold, lay a breath as slow as thunder and hotter than wrath. And above that cursed slumber, the walls whispered, not in voice, but in pressure. The memory of fire leaves scars even on stone. None entered Erebor now, but the mountain watched. It listened. To the east, the river running had changed its song. Where once it danced clear past the feet of Dale, it now stumbled. The fish grew strange, grey-eyed and silent. And in the deep pools near the shattered city, the waters no longer rippled when birds flew over them. They only waited, as if listening. And far below, in the tangled roots of the withered heath, the last dragons, broken-winged and bent with age, turned in restless slumber. They did not speak, for the tongue of dragonkind was long since lost to the world. But in their bones, they felt it. The fire was shifting. The shadows stirred first in tales, of course, as they always do. A woodcutter's child swore he saw the mountain blink in the dark. A goat herd found prints too wide for elk, too deep for wolf. And in the ale houses of Esgaroth, old men fell suddenly quiet, glancing over their shoulders when someone joked of dragons past. But even laughter sounds hollow near the Long Lake now, especially at dusk. In the halls of the woodland realm, King Thranduil stood long by his quiet maps, the light of the crystal lamps playing across his unmoved face. He had not spoken of Erebor in years, but now he watched the mountain more than the stars. And far to the west, in a quiet glade of Imladris, Elrond sat in thought, unmoving, as a single leaf fell upon his lap, curled, blackened at the edge. Autumn had not yet come. Something beneath the world had shifted. But perhaps the most ancient warning came from the land itself, from the stones. In the north of Wilderland, where rivers rise in the snow-fed crags and the skin of the earth is cracked and bare, a stone circle long forgotten began to tremble. Not break, not quake, just tremble, as if in memory. No one was left to hear it, only the wind. And in that wind came the faintest scent of burned gold. For in the mountain, in the vaults of the kings under the mountain, beneath the roots of the Arkenstone itself, the breath came slower now, but deeper. The fire under the mountain had begun to dream again. And not all dreams sleep. There are woods in the world older than kingdoms, where no axe has ever bit, nor footfall echoed loud. South of the grey mountains, east of the Anduin's silver gleam, lie the shadows of Mirkwood. Once they bore another name, Greenwood the Great, and the stars would dapple gently through leaves as light as elven breath. But no longer. The trees have thickened, their limbs lean close, as though speaking secrets or warning in silence. And deeper still, beyond the paths marked even by Thranduil's kin, there is a place where light dies before it can land, and the moss grows black upon roots that curl like fingers reaching upward from the earth. It was here that the whisper began. The elves do not walk that far east now, and if they do not return. But birds fly and birds see, and the crows that returned to Dol Guldur bore tidings on their feathers, ash-specked and sulphur-bitter. No voice spoke the tale aloud. It came instead like a breath on still air, like a ripple in a pool where no stone has fallen. Something old was moving again. The spiders stirred first. In the deep hollows beneath the forest floor, they stretched their legs, sensing heat where there had been only cold. Their mother, older than they, ancient and half-legend, pulsed in her sleep far below. A hum, low and hateful, passed between her brood. Fire, again. A pair of wood elves, straying too far while tracking a wounded heart, heard singing in the branches. But no singer. It was not song, truly, more like a memory, a child's rhyme half lost in time. They turned back, their hearts cold. One of them would not speak again, even under moonlight. And further north, in the glades near the enchanted river, a brown stag was found, turned to stone. Not by magic, but by fear. Mouth open, eyes wide, limbs frozen as though running from a thing it never saw. In Imladris, a leaf of Mirkwood, sent by a watchful scout, was laid before Elrond. Black-veined and brittle, it crumbled at his touch. The greenwood recoils, he murmured, but even he, wise among the wise, could not yet name the dread that moved beneath root and shadow. He knew only that something once cast out had taken breath again, not from the east, but from the very heart of the world, from Erebor. Yet deeper than Elrond's knowing was the lore of the Ents. And though they stirred not easily, not for war nor weather, something in the soil now reached their sleep. Treebeard, oldest of their kind, turned his mossed face southward. He did not speak, but a groan like bending timbers issued from him, and his roots dug deeper into the earth. The fire does not forget, he said at last. It only waits. In the hall of Thranduil, the wine grew bitter. Dreams unsettled his court, dreams of wings vast as clouds, and gold that bled fire when touched. One young guard took his life in the night, claiming he had heard the mountain breathing. But it was not just fear. Something older, something beneath words, stirred amid the shadow. A warning, yes, but also a calling. A tale once sealed by silence now began to unbind. Somewhere, in the forgotten corners of the forest, a stone tablet shifted in the earth. Cracked and moss-choked, it bore no language now known. But a handprint remained, deep as if pressed in molten stone, and around it, the scorched remains of roots that never grew back. The forest was listening, and far above, in a gap between storm clouds, a single red star flickered, just once above Erebor. The trees did not speak, but the wind did, and what it whispered was fire. The road from Rosgabel wound like a thread through the skirts of Mirkwood, and none now dared ride it alone. None, save one. He came cloaked in grey, a shape too tall for a merchant, too quiet for a soldier, and too old, or perhaps too old-seeming, to belong to the hurried world of men. The horse beneath him was lean but sure, its hooves knowing every hidden dip in the moss-covered earth. Its breath clouded in the chill air, though the sun rode high. None who saw him would name him aloud. But birds changed course at his passing. The wolves fell silent. Even the trees bent ever so slightly away, as if they too had learned to respect what rode alone. Gandalf had left no message in Rhosgobel. Radagast, absent-minded though he was, would have known something had shifted. But this journey was not for the telling. It was a listening, a ride to hear the world breathe, to mark the patterns in her sorrow. And in that silence, Gandalf now travelled east. He did not ride swiftly. It was not his way, for he knew that what he sought or feared was not a thing that could be met in open gallop, like orcs on a hill or goblins in a cave. No, this was something vast and slumbering, something you must approach with care, as one approaches the edge of a dream that might wake and swallow you whole. Twice that day he stopped without cause, not for rest. He had gone 3 days without sleep before, and would again, but to listen, to press his gloved hand to the bark of old trees and close his eyes. He did not speak, but once he frowned deeply. Another time he wept. Night came early in those lands. Long before sunset, the sky bruised and lowered its veil of grey, until even the shadows seemed to move with minds of their own. Gandalf lit no lantern. He had no need. His staff gave off the faintest glow, not of fire, but of memory, a light that reminded darkness it had not yet won. By moonrise, he reached a ridge that overlooked the withered heath. There he dismounted, slowly, and stood for a long while. The winds here were cruel and sharp. They cut sideways, bearing the scent of snow long dead and stone too old to crumble. Below him lay a barren plain, but not silent. The bones of old dragons lay scattered across the valley like broken swords, bleached by time, ignored by beast and bird alike. No one sang of this place. No one dared. He looked east, toward Erebor. It was a black mountain by night, its peak jagged and eternal, crowned now with an eerie stillness. But Gandalf's eyes were not those of common men, and in that darkness he saw it, not fire, not smoke, but pulse. The mountain breathed. His hand tightened on the staff. Once, long ago, he had warned Thorin. He had spoken of the price of gold, of the sleeping ruin curled beneath the king's treasure. But Thorin had been proud, and dwarves, Gandalf knew, carried their grief like iron. They do not bury it. They forge it into promise. Now the promise burned again. He turned away, mounting once more. His destination was not the mountain. Not yet. That time would come, when swords clashed and fate hung by threads of courage and madness. But for now, he rode for the south, to the White Council, to old friends and older doubts. Yet before he went, he took from beneath his cloak a small rune-etched stone. He placed it at the foot of a dying tree beside the ridge, muttering words so old even the stars might have paused to listen. "For the silence that watches us," he whispered, "and for what it dreams." Then he was gone, a shadow within shadow, riding south through the ash-laced wind. And the mountain dreamed on. The forest thickened as Gandalf rode southward, but not with life. No bird called here, no leaf trembled at the breeze. The very air felt weighed down, heavy with breathless memory. Roots grew wrong, as if pulled inward toward a deep, sunless center. The moss was not green here. It was grey, not from frost, but from sorrow. By the third day, Even the light seemed to forget itself. It did not filter through the trees, but bled in strange shafts, crooked and pale as bone. And then, beyond a black thorn bramble, Gandalf saw it. Dol Guldur, a crown of ruin set on a dead hill, surrounded by trees that leaned away from it like men shrinking from fire. It was not tall as towers go, nor wide as palaces, but it pressed upon the world, a thing not simply built, but remembered into being, summoned from deep hate and older hunger. Its stones, cracked and scorched, bore no banners, but dread flew from them all the same, the kind of dread that clings not to the skin, but to the soul. Gandalf did not ride closer. Instead, he walked, staff in hand, cloak tight, each step a silent defiance against the weight of the place. His boots found no trail, only the flattened remnants of paths that once knew armies. Long ago, Dol Guldur had been abandoned, but now it watched again. Not openly, not like a thing that welcomes, like a door cracked just enough to let the cold slip through. He reached the outer wall as the sun, unseen, passed its height. The fortress loomed, quiet as tombs. Yet something within stirred. He felt it. Not presence, exactly, but awareness. As if something not quite awake listened for the name it once bore. He had come here before, long ago, when whispers first arose of a shadow in the wood. Then it had been filled with illusions, traps, phantoms, the voice of the necromancer twisting from behind every stone. That shadow had fled when the White Council rose against it. But Gandalf had never believed it truly gone. He circled the wall's perimeter, not entering, not yet. In silence, he traced his fingers along the stone, feeling warmth where none should be. And deeper within, he heard it again. A heartbeat, not fast, not loud, but there, thrum, thrum. Not a man's, not a beast's, a will, a watching. Not yet, he muttered. You've not the strength to show your face, but you dream again, don't you? In the courtyard beyond, bones lay scattered, not of elves, not of dwarves. These were beasts, wolves perhaps, torn in strange ways, as though caught mid-change. Some were half ash, others etched with sigils Gandalf did not recognize. Magic of an older tongue, not black speech, but kin to it. Words meant not to summon, but to bind. He turned back. The wind had changed. It blew now from the east, hot, dry, scented faintly of iron and embers. The mountain is waking, he thought. But Dol Guldur did not fear Erebor. It knew of a deeper fire, one that did not sleep in gold, but behind masks and names. The fire that wears form when called, and vanishes into whispers when pursued. As he departed the edge of the ruin, Gandalf felt something press behind his eyes, a thought not his own. We remember you. He did not respond. To answer would be to acknowledge, and to acknowledge would be to invite. Instead, he mounted swiftly, drawing his cloak tighter. He would not tell the council yet. Not fully. Saruman would scoff. Galadriel would listen, but her gaze had grown distant of late, as if hearing other songs. Still, he knew what he had felt. Dol Guldur lived again, not in garrison, not in banner, but in will. And will, Gandalf knew, was more dangerous than armies. As he rode away, the fortress did not vanish into mist. Not this time. It simply remained. A mile before Dol Guldur's gate, the breath of the forest seemed to still, not just in wind, but in life. No insect buzzed, no bough creaked. Even the roots beneath the earth paused, holding the tension of something remembered but never named. Gandalf stood once more at the threshold. The ruin loomed in the dusk, like a wound that would not close. Cracked arches twisted toward a sky now dull with ash-tinged light, and what little sun pierced through came grey and sluggish as, though reluctant to witness what had risen again, the gate, though broken and bowed, still breathed a chill, not cold like winter's snow, but a deeper cold, dry, echoing, and oddly hungry. Moss hung here, but not green. Long ropes of grey tendrils like smoke frozen in place. The stone steps had not worn down from time, but seemed burned down, as if each step once bore the tread of something that scorched as it moved. He entered alone. The first chamber was vast and empty in the way that only cursed places are, where space feels not abandoned but watched. Pillars rose like petrified trees, and shadows draped between them like cloth left to rot. Gandalf stepped softly, his staff not tapping but gliding across the floor, its faint light casting runes from long-forgotten ages in soft golden rings. And in the center, a pool. It should not have been there. The hilltop bore no spring, and no rainfall reached this deep. Yet here it was, still, dark, rimmed in black stone. Its surface gave no reflection, not even Gandalf's. He approached. The water neither stirred nor welcomed. He did not kneel. Instead, he whispered, "Who lies beneath?" There was no reply. But somewhere above, in the rotted rafters high above the hall, something shifted, just once. No footfall, no wingbeat, a rearranging of presence. Gandalf raised his staff. "Show yourself." The silence was near human, deliberate. He pressed deeper into the fortress. Hallways narrowed, ceilings lowered. The scent of stone gave way to something older, not decay, but memory, as if the very walls held the last exhalations of those who had once fled them. He passed a broken sconce where the iron had melted into the shape of an open mouth. A carved stair spiraled downward into a belly of black stone, and the deeper he walked, the more he felt it. The presence, not alive, not dead, not even dreaming, expecting. Beneath the old throne room, long since shattered, lay a door without frame, not closed, not open. It leaned in place as if ashamed. Gandalf did not touch it. He simply passed through. There, in the chamber beyond, was the thing that chilled him. Not a beast, not a body, a mark, carved not in stone, but in absence, as though the rock had been forgotten in a shape that twisted even as he looked upon it, circular, jagged, crowned in flame, yet root-like. It pulsed, not with power, with promise. "Still you do not name yourself," Gandalf murmured, and then, just at the edge of hearing, a laugh. Not loud, not voiced, just a pressure in the air, curling behind the ear, like a trickle of smoke from a room one thought long cold. He turned back, slowly, unshaken but wary. Nothing followed him, not in step, but the presence moved, not with limbs, but with thought. As he emerged once more into the ruin's outer edge, he did not speak. His light faded. The forest beyond had not changed, but something had followed, not in form, in knowing, and far, across the world, in the heart of Erebor, the fire turned in its sleep. In a chamber beneath the woodland realm, far from feast and star-song, there was a room unmarked by time or pride. The stone there bore no runes. The doors were carved not in flourish, but in silence, and guards posted above spoke no words when passing by. Few knew of its occupant. Fewer still remembered his name. They called him the Hollow One. But once he had been a king. He sat now, cross-legged, not in shackles, but unmoving, as if stilled by something greater than iron. His hair, once dark, had greyed unevenly, and his eyes had grown pale, yet not blind. They looked without seeing, and yet saw too much. When Gandalf entered, the man did not stir. Only when the wizard lowered his staff, letting its gentle light touch the edges of the stone, did the figure lift his gaze. "You return," he rasped. His voice was not old, but worn, like parchment too often unrolled. "I do," Gandalf answered, stepping into the circle of gloom. "And still you are here." "There is no else for me," the man said, with a bitter smile. "They keep me where silence cannot flee, where memory is the only thing permitted to speak." Gandalf regarded him quietly. "You spoke of fire once, of wings beneath the mountain." The captive's fingers twitched. "I speak of many things, most of them unwelcome. I've seen Dol Guldur," Gandalf said softly. It breathed again. The prisoner laughed, a dry, empty sound. "Then you are late. It began long ago, before the birds fell silent, before the rivers turned, before I forgot the names of my sons." Gandalf frowned. "You said the shadow wears more than one shape. You said it wears names." "Yes," the man murmured, "but names are not masks. They are doors, and some doors open both ways." He leaned forward now, his pale eyes sharp with sudden clarity. "You think you face the fire that sleeps, but you don't. Smaug was never the beginning. He was a flame cast by another torch, a hunger born of a greater one." "What do you mean?" Gandalf asked, though he already feared the answer. The man did not reply. Instead, he reached slowly to the scar on his chest, a twisted rune burned into his skin by hands unseen. "I spoke once, in dreams. I whispered in my sleep, and the mountain listened. Not Erebor, the other one, the older mountain, the one beneath all mountains." His hand shook. "It gave me a gift, a voice not mine, but which I could not stop speaking. I told the dwarves where to dig. I told them the stone would gleam. I told them they were meant to rule." "You summoned the dragon?" "No," he said, almost a sob. "But I invited him." Gandalf was silent. Outside, the stone breathed gently, but the air had grown colder. "I was not the only one," the captive whispered now, his voice thinning like thread. "Others spoke, in tongues they didn't know, priests of shadow, whisperers. They thought they sought gold, but they were digging for a dream buried in fire." He looked up again. "It stirs." Gandalf's knuckles whitened around his staff. "What stirs?" "The first fire, the will that woke the dragons, the one that taught the mountain to hunger." Now the air was trembling, as if the words themselves bruised it. "I asked them to kill me," the man whispered. "They would not. They fear what might be born from my death." "Why now?" Gandalf asked. "Why stir again?" The man's eyes unfocused. "Because the one sleeps. The ring. It lies quiet, but not still. The fire senses it. It calls it. They were made of the same forge, you know. Shadow and flame. Lie and treasure." The wizard turned, troubled to his core. "Do you still dream?" Gandalf asked. "I dream nothing," the captive said with a faint smile. "But I remember your dreams." And as Gandalf left, the man began to hum, an old dwarven lullaby, twisted strangely, the melody fractured as if echoing from deep within a cavern filled with smoke. "Ash on gold, and gold on bone. Fire sleeps but is not gone. Call the name, and break the stone." The door closed behind him, and far beneath Erebor, cold shifted without touch. The mists had thickened over Mirkwood by the time Gandalf returned to the glades near Amon Lank. He did not ride, for the air would not allow it. The trees grew too close now, and the very bark seemed to bend away from light. His staff gleamed faintly at its tip, casting an orb of warmth barely wider than his stride. And yet the darkness pressed in like water behind glass. He did not call it fear. But even he, who had faced Balrogs and seen Morgoth's ruin in lore beyond song, kept his hand close to the hilt of his blade. The ruins of Dol Guldur crouched above him, and within them something stirred. He had not intended to return so soon, but the prisoner's words had seeded a storm in his mind. The first fire, the forge behind the dragon. These were not riddles, they were warnings, spoken in the language of madness that only those touched by deeper powers could voice. And it was here, among the ashes and broken stones of Armen Lunk, that the truth breathed again. He reached the inner court. It had changed. Where once bones lay scattered and silence sat thick as dust, now a form had risen, not built but gathered, dark branches bent into shape like ribs, mist frozen into a throne that pulsed as though alive. No creature sat upon it, but something watched. The shadows here did not merely stretch, they clung, oozed, bled upward along the stones like ink rising through cloth. And amid them, the sound began. Not a roar, not even a whisper, a voice. No words at first, only a tremor that echoed within the listener, not outside. Gandalf's breath caught, not in fear, in recognition. He had heard it before. Once, long ago, in the council chamber beneath the stars when Galadriel had lifted her gaze and said, "He is not gone, he is only waiting." Now the waiting had ended. Grey Pilgrim. It was not said aloud. It was imposed, like pressure behind the eyes. A voice that spoke from within one's bones, bending thought like heat bends air. "Why do you return?" Gandalf did not answer. His staff pulsed, casting light against the throne, revealing the contours of what was not truly there. The outline of a form both regal and formless, a crown of absence, eyes of soundless fire. You seek to bind again what has already unbound itself. "You are not yet whole," Gandalf said, his voice calm, low, not in body, not in will. The air tightened. "Nor need I be. Fire does not require shape to burn, and shadow does not need walls to walk." A low sound filled the chamber, not laughter, but something colder, a knowing. "The dragon is mine, not in leash, but in origin. What burns beneath his scales was born in me." Gandalf's eyes narrowed. "You speak as though Smaug is servant." "Not servant, symptom." The throne flared briefly, not with light, but with void. Shapes swirled around it, images half-formed. A forge in flame, rings, not of power, but of fire, gold-bound, claw-gripped. And above it all, a presence wearing not armor, but flame, crowned in silence. Gandalf stepped forward. "You are not yet Sauron," he said. "You are his ghost, his echo." And yet the echo is heard before the horn. Before the ring awakens, I shall burn the world's breath to ash. The stones shuddered. The wind outside stopped. The voice grew quieter, closer, behind Gandalf's very breath. "You see the ring as the danger, but the fire is older. It longs for home. It longs for gold. Erebor shall burn not for conquest, but to call the ring back." Gandalf raised his staff, not in threat, but in defiance. A light surged, silvery and cold, and the shadow flinched, not in pain, but annoyance, like one stirred too early from sleep. "You will not rise unchecked," Gandalf said, voice steady. "Not while I draw breath." The throne cracked, not shattered, cracked, as if forced to remember it had once been stone. The presence faded, not fled. It had said what it came to say, and Gandalf stood alone once more. But in the deepest corners of Dol Guldur, something smiled, and far beneath the lonely mountain, a single ember flared red, unbidden, and was swallowed by gold. The darkness did not flee when the voice withdrew. It lingered, not as fear, but as challenge, a silence that pressed with weight, as if daring Gandalf to believe the moment had passed. But he knew better. Dol Guldur had always been a place of illusions, a fortress of masks. And now, stripped of disguise, it wore its true face, not ruin, but wound, a scar upon Middle-earth that bled without blood. Beneath its stone, the shadow pulsed still, retreating, yes, but only to coil. Gandalf stood in the hall where the throne had cracked. His staff no longer glowed gently. It burned, pale white, edged with silver fire, a flame that cast no heat but wove light into every corner. He raised it slowly. A whisper curled from the shadows. "Still you shine, still you believe." The voice again, fainter now, yet clearer, no longer hiding. It clung to the air like mist to blade, coiling with bitter amusement. "Do you not see? You are alone." Gandalf's eyes flared. "Alone I may be, but not without purpose." And then he struck the floor with his staff, not with wrath, with will. The light surged. It did not explode nor roar. It unfolded like the breaking of dawn in a world that had forgotten sunrise. The stones groaned beneath it. The pillars shed illusions like bark stripped from rot. The carvings upon the walls writhed, revealing shapes that had not been made by mortal hands. Symbols burned into the stone not by chisel, but by presence. The shadow reeled, and from the deep came a cry, not beast, not man, a sound like every flame ever drowned in ash, a scream of defiance and of memory. For the light did not simply cleanse, it reminded the dark what it had once been, cast out, hunted, sealed. A flicker tore through the chamber, the ghost of a crown, a face in flame, a ring that pulsed once in echo. The presence tried to rise again. Gandalf raised his staff higher. "You are not reborn," he said. "You are remembered, and memory can be broken." With that, the light peaked. It poured from the staff into the floor, racing through every crack and hidden stair. It found chambers where old bones chattered, altars where black candles had long melted into stone. It scoured them all, not with fire, but with truth. And still, the fortress screamed. A roar came then, deeper than the foundation, from the belly of the ruin where names were buried and things were never meant to wake. The sound struck Gandalf like a wave of thunder and ash, but he stood unmoved. The staff dimmed at last, spent not from weakness, but from purpose fulfilled, and the darkness, once bold, slunk away, not destroyed, but wounded. A long silence followed. Then wind, actual wind, cool, real, honest. The mist parted. The sky above Dol Guldur cracked slightly, revealing a thin vein of stars, not full, not bright, but visible, for the first time in many years. Gandalf turned away, his cloak stirring behind him. He did not smile. There was no victory here, only warning. For he had seen into the heart of the shadow, and it was not Dol Guldur. It was fire, ancient, masterless, and longing. As he crossed back into the woods, his steps slower than before, he whispered under his breath, "Smaug, you are not alone." The halls of Caras Galadon shimmered as though woven from moonlight. Beneath the golden leaves of Lothlorien, time did not flow. It listened. Here, the world did not burn or bleed. It held its breath. But even Lothlorien could not keep the dark from whispering at its borders. Gandalf passed under the Talon arches as one returning not from travel, but from burden. His cloak bore dust not only of road, but of ruin. The guards bowed in silence, sensing more in his gaze than weariness. Galadriel had summoned the council. He had sent no word, but still, she had known. The gathering was small as ever. Galadriel, serene but stern, her gaze deep as wells long sealed. Elrond, troubled, though his hands folded in stillness. Saruman the White, tall, resplendent, his staff of carven ivory gleaming beneath the canopy. And Gandalf the Grey, wind-worn, flame-touched, eyes clouded not with ignorance, but with the weight of knowing. They stood in a circle of silver root and stone, a place unmarked by map, hidden even from the stars, the circle of sight. "Speak it, Mithrandir," Galadriel said. "You carry more than dust upon your cloak." Gandalf inclined his head. Dol Guldur breathes again, not in name alone, in will. Elrond's brow darkened. "We cast it down." "We scattered it," Gandalf replied, "but its heart never fled far." Saruman folded his arms. "And what would you have us believe now? That the necromancer stirs once more from that tomb of stone and ash?" "I do not ask belief," Gandalf said, voice low. "Only that you listen." He spoke then of what he had seen, the throne of mist, the formless voice, the cracking stone, the words spoken not in echo but in claim. He told of the captive king, a broken mind, yet speaking truths no sane lips should know. And beneath it all, he told of the fire, not the dragon, the fire behind the dragon. Saruman's frown deepened. "Poetic riddles. We deal in knowledge, not riddles." "You forget," Galadriel said softly. "Riddles built this world." But Saruman would not yield. "There are no signs from Erebor. No army moves, no banner is raised. If Sauron were truly rising again, we would know." "We do know," Gandalf said. "The signs are there. They no longer march in boot or banner. They whisper. They breathe through men's dreams and stir the roots beneath our feet. Erebor sleeps, but it dreams in flame." He turned to Elrond. "You've seen it too. The stars shift, the runes dim. The east grows heavier." Elrond nodded, reluctant. "The river is troubled. Messages go unanswered from Dale. The wood elves do not speak of it, but I know they watch the mountain now more than the sky." Saruman waved a hand. "Storms pass, fire sleeps. These are not omens. They are the mutterings of old men and frightened trees." "And yet," Galadriel said, "you do not deny them." Saruman's voice cooled. "I deny only the urgency. Let us not raise swords against wind." "But what of the ring?" Elrond asked. "The one?" Gandalf was silent for a long moment. Then, "It sleeps, but not quietly." A hush fell over the circle. "The fire beneath Erebor calls to it," Gandalf said. "Not like a master to servant, but like kin. The dragon is not merely beast. He is echo, a fragment of something ancient, something waking." Galadriel's gaze sharpened. "Then we must act." Saruman shook his head. "Number. To act without proof is to risk exposing our watchfulness. Let the dragon sleep. Let the fire stir without answer. If we strike too soon, we may strike too late," Gandalf said, firm now. The wind stirred the melon leaves above them, and the trees seemed to sigh. "I will go," Gandalf said. "There is a chance still to shape what comes, but not by might. Not yet. We must move the world quietly." "Toward what?" asked Elrond. Gandalf looked eastward, though no mountains could be seen from here. "Hope," he said, "or at the very least, a burglar." Saruman scoffed. "You would place our fate in the hands of dwarves and thieves." Gandalf smiled. but it did not reach his eyes. "I would place it," he said, "in hands that do not yet know their strength." He turned to go. Galadriel's voice followed, soft and grave. "Then go quickly, for the shadow no longer waits." The north lay wide and waiting, a land of long snows and longer silences. Here, the bones of kingdoms older than memory slept beneath the roots of frost-hardened trees. The rivers bore no song, and the hills bore no crown. But still, something moved. Gandalf rode swift but unseen, taking paths long forgotten, trails once used by dwarves and rangers, now known only to the wind. He did not travel as emissary nor envoy. He rode as one who plants, whose work will not be seen until it burns beneath the feet of kings and creatures alike. His first stop was the Iron Hills. There, beneath dark peaks and stone-cut banners, the dwarves of Dain Ironfoot forged in silence. They had heard no call, yet already they prepared. War never left the blood of Durin's folk. It simply slept in the shape of hammers. Dain listened with narrowed eyes as Gandalf spoke. "Smaug stirs," the wizard said, "not in flight, in hunger." Dain said little. His beard was flecked with silver now, though his eyes were steel. He looked eastward, toward Erebor, and nodded once. "I will not march," he said at last, "but my forge will." That was enough. Next, Gandalf crossed into the realm of the Long Lake, Esgaroth, a city rebuilt upon old stilts and proud new stone. Its waters no longer wept steam from dragonfire, but its people still bore the memory in their marrow. The master of the town, a thinner man than his crown deserved, received Gandalf with polished speech and little patience. "We have peace," he said, hands folded over ledgers. "We trade well with the elves. We pay our respects to Erebor. What more would you ask of us?" "Only this," Gandalf replied. "Keep your ships fastened, your eyes sharp, and your words honest." It was a quiet threat, veiled in courtesy. And though the master said nothing, his dreams that night were filled with wings the size of houses and gold that wept blood. But Gandalf did not tarry. He moved next to the wild places, to outposts where old rangers watched the North Road and whispered of goblin drums in the far hills. He gave them no commands, only questions. How often does the sky turn red at dawn? When did the foxes stop coming near? Have the wolves learned to watch in silence? And always the same answer: too often. He passed into the foothills of the Grey Mountains, where the ruins of ancient dwarf holds lay collapsed beneath centuries of rockfall. There, he found a tomb, unmarked but not empty. He laid his hand upon the stone and whispered in the tongue of old Khazad, "Your sons may rise again. Sleep now, but not for long." The wind howled through the pass like a horn long unblown, and still Gandalf moved, not by road, but by memory, tracing the lines of the map not written in ink, but in witness. He had seen too many times how evil grew, not in leaps, but in layers. A small fear, a missing scout, a tongue that speaks too late. He knew this was how Sauron moved, and he had seen enough to know the pattern was beginning again. But not all was dark. In Dale, children sang again in the square. In Erebor's outer halls, the dwarves chanted deep, forgotten songs. They did not know why their forges seemed hotter this winter, or why the gold felt heavier in their hands, but they sensed it. Something approached, and among the dwarves of Thorin's kin, scattered, proud, grieving still for their lost homeland, a murmur passed, quiet and strange, that something might yet return to them, a chance, a quest. And so Gandalf rode, cloak furled tight, a whisper on the wind between mountain and marsh. He did not carry war. He carried hope, sharp, fragile, and terrible. And the mountains listened. Far beneath, in the deepest vault of Erebor, gold shifted again. But this time, it was not alone. A single scale, vast, red, and ancient, rose from beneath the treasure hoard and fell once more. Far from the mountains and their murmurs, past the long rivers and the brooding woods, there lay a green place, untouched by dread, the Shire. It did not whisper of shadow. It did not look east with worry. It baked pies and planted turnips and argued politely over fence posts and festival dates. The trees were small and kindly, the roads gentle and always curving as though in no hurry to reach their end. And in a hole in the ground, though not a dirty, wet hole, lived a hobbit, Bilbo Baggins. His waistcoat was tidy, his garden neatly trimmed, his pantries were overstocked and his books well thumbed. And though he sometimes walked to the top of the hill with a pipe in hand and looked east just briefly, he would shake his head and mutter, "Nonsense," before returning to his second breakfast. But the world had not forgotten him, nor had Gandalf. He arrived not with thunder, nor fire, nor any declaration, just a knock on the round green door, and the sudden sound of teacups nervously clinking into place. "Gandalf," Bilbo exclaimed. "Well, I thought you were off doing something dreadful, dragons or goblins or councils again." "I've done all three before lunch," Gandalf replied, "and now I thought I'd drop in for something less dangerous. Tea." The visit was not long, but it left a long shadow. Not dark, but thoughtful. They spoke of simple things, gardens, pipeweed, the changing shapes of clouds, but Gandalf's eyes wandered often to the east-facing window, and Bilbo noticed. "So," Bilbo said at last, refilling the kettle, "you've got something stirring again, haven't you?" "I always have something stirring, Bilbo," the wizard said with a half-smile. "But this time, it may need more than a stir. It may need a hand that knows how to walk away from treasure." Bilbo raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't sound like a dwarf." "No," Gandalf said quietly. "It sounds like a hobbit." The fire crackled. Outside, a thrush landed on the garden wall and tapped its beak 3 times before flying away. An odd sound, easily forgotten. Gandalf did not stay the night. Hobbits, after all, treasured their guest rooms and their quiet evenings in equal measure. But when he left, he looked back once more at Bag End. The grass was green. The chimney smoked contentedly. A round figure moved behind the window, fussing with a tablecloth. The wizard whispered, "You are not ready yet, Bilbo Baggins. But the world may be ready for you." And then he was gone, into the dusk, where shadows touched the road like ink spilled from the east. Back inside, Bilbo stirred his tea, frowning slightly. He could not say why, but suddenly the kettle sounded like the wind in a cave, and the clink of a spoon like something heavier, like gold. He shook his head. Nonsense. But that night, he dreamed of a door, vast and carved in fire, opening with a sound like mountains shifting, and on the wind, a dragon's breath. In the quiet before the fire rekindles, there is always a drawing of breath, a gathering of memory, a summoning of will. In a glade not far from Bree, beneath a canopy of ash trees whose roots once heard elvish song, Gandalf met with Thorin Oakenshield. The dwarf stood proud, though time and exile had weathered his beard and sharpened his gaze. He bore no crown, but the kingship sat behind his eyes, a weight not worn, but awaited. His hands were calloused not from gold, but from wandering. Yet they trembled as he unrolled the map. Erebor, the lonely mountain, drawn in ink and sorrow, its peak coiled like a fist. The secret door traced faint and fine as a whispered hope. "We have tried before," Thorin said, voice low. "Scouts, merchants, men in disguise. The mountain swallows them." "Because you approached it like a kingdom," Gandalf replied. "But it is not a kingdom, it is a wound. And wounds do not open to threats, they open to quiet hands." Thorin studied him. "You have someone in mind?" Gandalf gave a small smile. "Not someone, something. A hobbit." The dwarf blinked. "A what?" Gandalf chuckled softly, though his eyes remained watchful. "A small creature, no sword, no lineage, but he has courage that does not know its name yet, and that is the truest kind." Thorin hesitated. "You would send a halfling into Smaug's shadow?" "Not to slay," Gandalf said. "To see, to steal, to awaken something that slumber and sorrow cannot bind. I do not need warriors, Thorin. I need unexpectedness." The dwarf leaned over the map. "And the door?" "It remains," Gandalf said. "Hidden. Moon runes mark it. Durin's day shall reveal its key, if you are there to read it." Silence settled between them, broken only by the crack of firewood in the camp. At last, Thorin spoke again. "You believe the time is now?" "I believe," Gandalf said slowly. "The time will not wait. The fire under the mountain stirs, and it does not stir alone. If you do not return to Erebor, something else will." Thorin touched the line that marked the secret path. His finger paused over the carved runes. "My people are scattered," he said, "but we are not broken." Gandalf nodded. "Then summon them, not to reclaim a throne, to light a fire the dark has not yet snuffed." And so the letters were sent. To Balin in the Blue Mountains, who still polished old axes and watched the stars for signs. To Dwalin, whose hammer had cracked many a skull and whose loyalty was forged in the blood of Azanal-Bizar. To Fili and Kili, young and eager, born after Erebor's fall, but carrying its memory in their bones. To Bifur, Bofur, Bombur, Oin, Gloin, Nori, Dori, Ori, each bearing a piece of a broken crown. They came not for riches, they came for home. And in the wizard's hands, the wind carried other messages, unspoken but heard. To the eagles in their high nests, to Radagast among the brown leaves of Rosgobel, to Galadriel across moonlit waters, to the watchful stars above Rivendell. A fire was beginning, not loud, not bright, but chosen. And far across the land, in Bag End, Bilbo Baggins awoke with a start. He had dreamed of a voice he did not know, saying, "The road curls east. Take only what you fear to lose." He found no meaning in it. But that morning, he packed 2 extra handkerchiefs without thinking and spent an unusually long time staring at the pantry shelves. And in the halls of Erebor, beneath 500 feet of gold, something turned once more. Not awake, but listening. Beneath the earth, beyond stone and silence, lay a chamber that no dwarf had walked in 100 years. Its walls were carved not with runes, but with the weight of gold itself. Coins upon coins, crowns upon scepters, goblets half melted from heat that never cooled. It did not glint. It glowed, faint and heavy, like the light of sunset through dust. And atop it, he slept. Smaug the Golden. Wings folded like broken towers, talons curled like blackened sickles. His chest rose and fell with a rhythm older than fear. Each breath stirred the horde, sent quiet avalanches through ancient treasure. In sleep, he still possessed it. Every coin, every gem, every stolen heirloom. not by touch, but by being. The mountain did not bear him. He was the mountain. But now the horde trembled. It was not sound that woke him. It was absence, a thread in the weave of his treasure disturbed. Something touched not with hands, but with will. The world had begun to remember him, and Smaug remembered the world. His nostrils flared. A soundless growl passed through the chamber like an earthquake trapped in a tomb. He did not open his eyes, not yet, but deep within his mind, images burned, dwarves, a grey figure with a staff of light, a small hand, pale against gold, and a ring, not seen but sensed, its echo still distant but tugging like a chain half buried. He stirred, coins cascaded like rain. The stone beneath him groaned, and from his throat came a hum, deep, resonant, cruel. The horde shifted with him, as if it too had waited long for movement. Jewels caught firelight where none existed. A goblet cracked from sheer pressure. Still, Smaug did not rise. He listened, not to sound, but to the heart of the world. Far above, a raven circled the peak of Erebor 3 times, then flew east. In the valleys below, deer fled the tree line. The river waters stilled. The sky, clear and pale at dawn, dimmed with no cloud in sight. And in Lake Town, a boy awoke screaming, unable to name the fire he had seen in his dreams. Smaug's eyelids twitched. The flame beneath them burned. He remembered Dale. He remembered the bowman's cry, the screams, the stone crumbling under his claws. He remembered the feeling of dominion, of knowing that none could stand against his wrath. And yet, in his dreams there had been another flame, smaller, defiant, a light that did not burn but revealed. He did not know its name, but it angered him. One wing stretched, slow as a landslide. The sound echoed through the vault, and dust older than kingdoms fell from the heights. A crown of gold slipped from its resting place and shattered. The dragon opened one eye. It was not red. It was not gold. It was fire, as though flame had taken shape and learned to see. He did not roar. He smiled, for Smaug was not simply waking. He was waiting, and now he was aware. Somewhere beyond the mountain, something approached. Not an army, not a king, a change. And dragons, for all their might, fear only one thing: a world no longer theirs. The mountain burned only in dream. But far to the south, in lands where the grass grew no longer green and the skies turned sickly in the light of dawn, other fires were kindling, without smoke, without heat, but with intent. Mordor. It lay quiet, yet its silence was not peace. Barad-dûr was not rebuilt, not in stone, but its will had returned, coiled deep in the veins of the earth, carried by creatures who needed no sun, no banner, no trumpet call, and beyond the mountains of shadow there gathered the unseen. From forgotten strongholds came orcs, not the wild kind bred of chaos, but those marked with sigils. None remembered carving. Their armor bore no rust, only ash. Their blades, curved like scorn, had not yet tasted blood, but trembled to do so. In Dol Guldur, the forges stirred again, not with fire, but with whisper. Black metal whispered into shape by voices older than steel. Things were being made that had not been made since the elder days, blades that thirsted, helms that watched, and in the ruins of Rhûn, strange priests circled ancient monoliths. Their chants were not loud, they were low, as though asking the stone itself to wake. One among them bore a staff crowned with bone. His name was not known, but the beasts of the eastern wilds shied from him, and even the wargs refused his command. He had no eyes, but he saw. He had seen the smoke curl over Erebor's peak. He had felt the ripple when Smaug stirred, and he had cast runes into blood and flame that answered with a single word: soon. Atop the heights of Angmar, where no fire burned and no plant grew, a horn was sounded, but only the dead heard it. In the black halls beneath Gundabad, weapons long sealed behind iron gates were dusted off by gnarled hands. And in the tangled hearts of corrupted forests, twisted creatures that once were elves opened their mouths for the first time in years and screamed. But none of this was known yet to the west. They watched Erebor, eyes drawn by the memory of flame. They did not see the blade beneath the table, but Gandalf had begun to sense it. In Rivendell, he sat beside Elrond, beneath a banner of stars. Neither spoke for a long time. Then Gandalf said, "There is a smell in the east wind. Not fire, not smoke, something sharper." Elrond nodded. "I have felt it too. Something prepares, quietly, as if it already knows we will not look that way." "Because we fear the mountain," Gandalf said. "We fear what we remember." "But what we forget," Elrond murmured, "may yet be the death of us." The stars trembled slightly. Far to the south, beyond the range of song or hope, a black ship was being carved of wood that had never known light. It bore no sail. It needed none. And it would carry a messenger with no name, no voice, and a gift made of silver and poison. For Sauron's eye had not reopened. Not yet. But his finger had begun to move. The sky that day was clear, as if the world itself held its breath. They had come not as armies, but as a company. 13 dwarves, a hobbit, and a legend long spoken in halls beneath the mountains. They came not in glory, but in memory. Their boots were worn, their eyes sharpened by exile and dream, and somehow they entered. The tale of how Thorin's company breached Erebor was one that would pass into song, a tale of moonlight on stone, of a door forgotten by time and opened by fate, of a hobbit who crept beneath sleeping fire and returned not with treasure, but truth. Smaug's fury, when roused, had fallen not on the dwarves, but upon the men of Laketown. The sky had burned, the lake had hissed, but a black arrow found its mark, and the dragon fell not with a cry, but with a curse, a long, smouldering howl that still echoed in the cold stone of his hoard. And then, silence. Erebor stood open. The halls of the kings were cold and dust-laden, but beneath the ruin and the scorch, the bones of the kingdom still gleamed. Proud arches, mosaics untouched, runes still whispering when read aloud. Thorin stood before the throne of Thrain. He did not speak. He simply placed a single hand on the stone and bowed his head. It was not yet a crown, but it was a home. The dwarves set to work, not singing yet, not fully, but with hammers and brushes, restoring what time had not claimed. The forges were lit again, shyly at first. Gold was found still intact, vast as rivers, untouched even by dragonfire. And yet, something lingered. The Arkenstone was found, or rather felt, a heart of mountain, pulsing faintly even in the palm. Thorin took it, but he did not speak of it, not to the others, not to Bilbo. And in that silence, a shadow stirred. For while Smaug's body lay broken beyond the lake, his hoard still burned with the imprint of his desire. His presence did not die. It soaked into the gold. And in every coin, in every gleaming chalice, in every jewel untouched by time, there lingered a whisper, "Mine." The dwarves did not hear it at first, but they grew watchful, then possessive, then wary of each other. And Thorin began to change. His voice grew harder, his commands sharper. He paced at night, sleepless, murmuring to himself, "It is ours, it is ours. Let none take what is owed." The others noticed, but said nothing. Only Bilbo, quiet and observant, watched with growing unease. He saw how the light of the gold reflected not only on Thorin's face, but in his eyes, and it was not kind. Outside, the world moved. The men of Lake Town came, pleading for aid. Thorin refused. Elves from the woodland realm approached, not for war, but for balance. Thorin raised the gate, and so the mountain, once silent, now bristled with tension. Dwarves readied axes, elves strung bows, men sharpened pikes with hands still blistered from the fire. A battle neared, not of conquest, but of claim. And above it all, in the broken corridors Smaug once haunted, the gold glimmered softly, breathing almost, as if the dragons still dreamt beneath it. Gandalf stood on a high ridge, watching as the hosts gathered like storm clouds around the base of the mountain. "He sleeps no longer," he murmured. Elrond, beside him, asked, "Smaug?" Gandalf shook his head. "Number, the other fire." And in a place far from stone and spear, where black stars burned in skies without wind, a single ring turned slightly in its bed of dirt, as if remembering a master's call. Far from Erebor and its rumbling halls, beyond the clash of dwarves and men and elves beneath the mountain's shadow, there lay a quiet hill near the river Gladden. The reeds grew tall, the water whispered old songs, and beneath the mud and stone, in a bed unmarked by tomb or tale, something lay still, a simple band of gold, untouched, unseen, unbroken. It had not been held in many lifetimes. It had not felt the warmth of skin nor the pressure of desire in an age of men. It should have been forgotten, and yet it was not, for the one ring does not die. It waits. In that forgotten glade where birds flew low and beasts crept softly, the very earth grew tired around it, as if the land itself felt the weight of what it carried. No rune marked its resting place. No eye could find it. But the ring listened. It had felt the dragon's death, not with grief, but with interest. Smaug was not kin to the ring, but he was of the fire, and fire remembers fire. It had felt the Arkenstone lifted. It had tasted the quarrels over gold and heard Thorin's voice crack with growing greed. These were not commands, they were conditions. Like the softest call over water, like the breath of smoke through a forest long starved, the ring began to stir. Not physically, not visibly, but it remembered the world, and the world, in turn, began to remember it. In dreams, men saw a golden eye in the darkness. In the east, shadows sharpened into shape. In the south, the ashes of old forges began to stir with no flame. In Gondor, the white tree did not blossom that year, and in Imladris, Elrond felt a silence press behind his thoughts, a silence with weight, with shape, with purpose. The ring did not speak. It did not need to. It simply was. And in that being, it beckoned. Not loudly, not yet, but like the turning of a tide beneath still waters, it pulled. And far to the west, in the gentle green hills of the Shire, Bilbo Baggins paused as he was unpacking his old travelling satchel. A few trinkets had remained there, dusty and forgotten. A compass, a folded map, a button from a coat long mended. But beneath the lining, stitched into a hidden pocket by some impulse he could not recall, there was nothing. He blinked. He could have sworn something had once been there, something smooth, something round. He shook his head, closing the satchel again. "I'm getting odd in the head," he muttered. "Too many riddles, not enough breakfast." But he glanced eastward, and the sun, half risen over the brandy wine, felt colder than it should. For the ring had begun to remember the shape of its bearer, and its silence would not last forever. The Saar battle had ended beneath the lonely mountain. Blood upon gold. The cries of elves and dwarves echoed off the stone, and the eagle's wings beat over the plain like a storm finally broken. But even as banners were lowered and swords sheathed, Gandalf's gaze had turned southward. For in Dol Guldur, the shadow did not sleep. It shifted. Galadriel came with light. Not an army, not flame and hammer, but a presence, older than stone, deeper than silence, brighter than any fire born of mortal forge. She stood beneath the dying trees of the forest, once called Greenwood the Great. Her white robes stirred in wind that did not move the leaves. Her eyes reflected the stars that had not yet risen, and Dol Guldur shrank from her. The fortress that had stood for centuries without siege now bent inward, not from blade, but from truth. The walls cracked, not from assault, but from memory, the memory of what it had once been before shadow made it its home. The necromancer did not speak this time. He fled, not in shape, not in scream, but in intention. His will broke from the stone, uncoiled from the roots, and slid like smoke through the air, unseen, ungrasped, alive. Galadriel stepped into the black court. She raised her hand, and with a word unspoken, a song that trembled the earth from leaf to stone, she unmade the illusion. The towers fell, the thorned gates withered, the darkness shattered like glass beneath water, and Greenwood took breath again. But though the fortress died, the voice did not. The presence had fled northward, not to conquer, but to scatter. It would not return soon, but it would return stronger. Galadriel turned to Gandalf, who now stood among the roots of the broken keep, his face solemn, his hands clasped upon his staff. "It is done," she said softly. "For now," he replied. She looked to the east. "Do you still feel it?" He nodded. "The ring stirs." Galadriel lowered her gaze. "Then all this," she gestured to the fallen ruin, "was merely opening a window, while the door remains closed." "Yes," Gandalf murmured, "but the wind now knows where to blow." From the edges of Mirkwood, the trees whispered in relief. The spiders fled, the stars returned, but beneath the roots of the world, in cracks not even light could touch, the shadow curled like smoke in a sealed jar. It had fled not in fear, but in preparation. The mountain stood quiet now. Erebor's gates were sealed once more, not in defiance, but in vigil. Within, dwarves labored in silence, shaping halls not only of gold, but of memory. The Arkenstone was buried deep in the king's chamber, wrapped not in silk, but in silence. Thorin's crown, once taken in fury, now rested in stone beside his tomb. The dragon was gone, but the fire, the idea of fire, remained. In Lake Town, the people rebuilt again, wood by wood, nail by nail. Their children sang strange lullabies in the evening, not of gold, but of hobbits and riddles and secret doors. They did not fully understand what had passed, but they knew something had shifted, something old had ended, something older had begun. In Rivendell, Elrond wrote quietly. He added no flourish to his pages, only truth, that the fire in the mountain had not been only flame, but echo, that in slaying one beast, they had stirred a deeper one. Galadriel walked her gardens beneath moonlight, silent and still. The trees spoke gently now, but her heart knew the dark was not dead. It was simply watching again, behind 1,000 unseen eyes. And in the west, upon the hill, a hobbit sat before his fire, Bilbo Baggins. He held no sword now, no map, only a pipe and a quiet smile. But in his coat pocket, beneath stitched wool and forgetfulness, something rested. A ring. It was still. It did not glow. But sometimes, when the wind sighed through the window and the fire crackled just so, he felt a weight in his chest that was not age nor memory, but possibility. A story, not one he yet wished to write, but one that waited nonetheless. Gandalf visited only once more, before the snow came. They spoke little. Only at the door did the wizard pause and say, "Do not let the quiet fool you, Bilbo. Peace is a gift wrapped in watchfulness." And Bilbo, ever polite, said, "Come back when the kettle's warm." The wizard smiled and walked into the fog. Far away, in lands unseen by hobbit or elf, the wind carried with it a song of no singer, a note without music, a hum beneath the heartbeat of the world. And it said, "Not yet, but soon." From fire came loss, from silence, return. But in the smallest hands, the last hope burns.